Hi, I'm Christina and welcome to Aussie Biology. Today I'm talking about an iconic Australian tree, the red river gum, or Eucalyptus camaldulensis, if you want the scientific name. The red river gum is a eucalyptus tree, which is a group of trees that produce eucalyptus oil in their leaves. And we have lots of species and subspecies that are native to Australia, and you see them everywhere around Australia. They grow quickly, they are evergreens, keeping their leaves all year round, so it's common to see them in parks and in people's yards. They also release that distinctive eucalyptus smell from their leaves, especially when it gets hot. In Australia, we call them gum trees because it's common to see the sap being exuded from the trunk of the tree, and it's very gummy and sticky. As kids, we'd avoid touching it unless we were trying to get it on our siblings. The resin is useful to the tree for wound healing and to repel insects, and the Indigenous people have many uses for the gum, including medicinal. And there are biotech companies isolating the active chemicals from these trees for use in their products. The red river gum is unique among gum trees because it is the only eucalyptus tree that can be found in every state and territory in Australia. As the name suggests, they grow along watercourses and floodplains, whether that's along the coast or inland Australia. They are called red gums because of their red wood. They can grow from 20 to 40 metres tall, and as you can imagine, they provide habitat and welcome shade to people and animals in and around the water, and they feature in a lot of iconic Australian art. They tolerate temperatures from -6 to 54 degrees Celsius. They can tolerate drought and soil salinity, and they produce seeds prolifically while still very young. So all these things make them very adaptable. I discovered that this species has successfully invaded many countries, but I've decided just to focus on the US. This is where you can find them in the US, along with some other species of eucalyptus trees, mostly around the California area. They were introduced to California in the 1850s by Australians during the California Gold Rush. Thousands of acres were planted at the encouragement of the state government, as it was hoped the trees would provide timber for furniture, railway sleepers, and construction. The climate of California is similar to Australia, and the trees thrived. However, it turned out the young trees were unsuitable for the uses they were proposed for. The wood split and warped after harvest, unlike the old growth trees that had been harvested in Australia. And given that they can live for 500 to 1,000 years, the red river gum industry was doomed. However, they did really well in California due to a lack of natural pathogens and predators, and they spread rapidly. There are mixed opinions on whether these trees should be eliminated from California, so let's have a look at the arguments for and against this. On the let's kill them all team, number one, they're not native, so they disrupt native ecosystems and displace native species. This is probably the most biologically sound argument of them all, but let's face it, every country in the world has invasive species now. Is it really possible to turn back the clock? Number two, some people think these trees contribute to the fire risk, but this claim is inconclusive. It is true that the eucalyptus oil in the leaves is flammable, and the habit of eucalyptus trees to drop leaves and branches all year round produces a lot of leaf litter. Number three, trees near streams affect the chemical composition of the water. This happens as leaf litter enters the waterway and rots in the water. In Australia, many of our waterways are brown because of the tannins in the leaves. So this would impact the native species in and around the watercourse. Now the arguments for keeping the trees. Number one, Some advocates say the fire risk has been overstated, and because the trees absorb so much water, they actually act as a barrier to fire. And in fact, in the early days of their introduction, they were known as fever trees because they absorbed so much water. There was reduced breeding of mosquitoes and less malaria around. Number 2, to get rid of the trees now would be too expensive, and using herbicides would affect the whole ecosystem, not just the trees. Valid argument. Number 3, they are an iconic and attractive part of the Californian landscape and should not be removed for aesthetic reasons. Well, I can't argue with that. And number 4, they've been here for so long they have become part of the natural ecosystem. So while there is evidence that some native species use the trees as habitat, such as the monarch butterfly, the great horned owl, and herons, 200 years is not long in biological time, and certainly not long enough for these trees to become part of a balanced Californian ecosystem. So what has happened is some plantations have been removed, with native trees being restored, and it's expected some inland groves will die out as water becomes scarcer. A good example of the conundrum these trees present can be found at the University of California in San Diego. Here, the 220,000 trees are an iconic and venerated part of the university landscape. However, in 1984, a beetle called the eucalyptus longhorned borer, which is native to Australia, was introduced and began an infestation of the trees at the university. No one is sure how they got there, whether they were introduced intentionally or accidentally. But they very rapidly started killing trees. In the 1980s and 90s, hundreds of the trees died. But then in 1992, scientists in Australia discovered a wasp that parasitises the eggs of the beetle. In 1993, these parasitic wasps were introduced to the trees on campus, and the beetles were successfully brought under control. Biologically speaking, it was a questionable practice to introduce a biological control for a species that was introduced in the first place. Normally, biological control is used to protect native species. However, more eucalyptus pests have since been introduced, though none as devastating as the long-horned beetle. People continue to battle the trees by vandalising them, running them over, stomping on seedlings, and injecting herbicides. And as you can see, looking at groves of these trees in California, the native plants do not grow underneath the trees, so there's no understory or habitat there. But despite some people's obvious negative feelings towards them, the university wants to protect and preserve them. Personally, I'm looking forward to seeing some trees from home when I travel to California. I hope a happy balance can be struck between those who want to keep the trees and those who want to get rid of them. What do you think? Let me know in the comments.